second meeting of the Senate Standing Committee on Families and Children. And I would ask that everyone please silence your phones before we begin. And if the Secretary would please call the roll.
Senator Elkins.
Present.
Senator Girdler. Senator Harper Angel. Senator Mays Bledsoe. Senator Meredith.
Present.
Senator Tishner. Senator Webb. Senator Westerfield. Senator Wise. Vice Chair Rocky Adams. Chairman Carroll.
Here. We do not have a quorum, but that does not matter because we do not have anything to vote on today, and we do not have minutes, so we're good. This morning we have Commissioner Dennis here, and I asked her to do this today. During conversations with Secretary Friedlander, I learned of progress that we have made in getting social workers in, and pretty excited about that. So, and I know there's an ask in the budget for more positions. So it seems that we're making some progress in this area, and I think that's a pretty big deal. So it's why I asked her to come in and kind of give an update on where we are and kind of maybe discuss what are we able to do, how are we improving the quality of services and in the oversight with some of our families that are having some problems, and what even more numbers, what we can accomplish with that, and what the impact is going to be on our kids and protecting our kids primarily. So, Madam Commissioner, if you would please come forward, whoever's coming with you, and you all please introduce yourself for the record, and you have the floor.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to be here to talk about our social workers and our hiring and the progress we've made. So my name is Lisa Dennis, and I am the Commissioner with the Department for Community-Based Services.
Good morning. My name's Laura Beacon, Staff Assistant for the Department.
And again, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for, again, the opportunity to be here to talk about the progress we've made with hiring our social workers. I want to say thank you to both the governor as well as the General Assembly for the support and recognition of the important work that our social workers do across the state. The work that they do is hard and demanding, and I cannot say thank you enough for the support and recognition that has been given to our social workers by the governor and the General Assembly. We've been able to do a lot of good work because of that support, and we do appreciate the proposed budgets, both by the governor and the House proposed budget that includes an additional 100 social workers. 50 for each year, but we are concerned a little about by the wording in the House proposed budget that eliminates the funding for almost all of our vacancies within the department, and what that may mean for our ability to hire additional staff and for our budget overall. But right now, our understanding of our directive by both the governor and the General Assembly is to continue hiring social workers, and we've been successful in doing that. Talk a little bit about hiring and where we're at and where we've came from. In December of 2022, we had 1,183 social workers across the state, and 965 of those were frontline caseload carrying social workers. So 965 were on the front line carrying a caseload. And then in December of 2023, we had 1,355 social workers overall and 1,121 frontline caseload carrying social workers. That's a difference over the 12-month period of an increase overall of 172 social workers, and of that increase, 156 of those social workers were frontline caseload carrying social workers. So again, well, we've made progress. We still have need, particularly in certain areas for additional social workers, but also the good news is that our turnover rates have improved as well. So in 2020, Our turnover for the department overall was right at 13%, and for our social work job classifications, it was at 30. 2021, department overall, 20%. Our social work positions was at 40% turnover in 2021. In 2022, we've seen a little bit of improvement. Our department overall turnover went to 14%, and our our social work job classifications went to 34%. But the most improvement happened in 2023. Our overall department turnover was 9.56%, and our social work turnover was at 17%. So we have significantly, we've also been able to retain those positions as well. And the good news with that is that we're seeing some improvement with regards to our caseloads. So our caseloads peaked around 38 at our highest point. And that's a statewide average, so depending on the county or the area, that may look very differently, but our statewide average peaked around 38. And currently caseloads are between 31 and 35. And what's important to note about that is of that 156 frontline caseload carrying social workers, approximately 100 of those are newer staff. They are in some stage of training. So when social workers are within that training period, they either do not have a caseload at all, or they're carrying a reduced caseload. So that range at 31 would be if everyone was carrying a full caseload, and the 35 would be if you exclude the 99 that are in training right now completely. And we know it's somewhere in between because some of those newer staff are building a caseload and carrying a caseload. So caseloads have improved as well. So with the additional staff, we are seeing our ability to, like I said, to reduce some of the stress on our staff, enable them to more timely respond to the needs of families and children, and provide a higher quality of care to families. More timely get access to services. And again, as we are seeing more staff come on board, more staff to get trained, and we are seeing our turnover rates decrease and building capacity within the department to serve families that need it most. I could continue talking about our efforts around retention, but that's a quick summary of where we have been and where we're at and the progress that we've been making.
Okay. What do you? I know the pay factors into that,
Yes.
but what are you all doing structurally, administratively to make sure that the longevity of the staff and to keep turnover rates down and to attract more? I mean, this is pretty exciting compared to
Yes.
where we've been, and I mean, we need to continue this trend because again, the overall goal is the quality and being able to protect our kids, and I know that's still a significant caseload.
Yes, that caseload is still too high, and we are working to reduce that. As we again hire additional staff, as we reduce some of our backlog. We are seeing those caseloads decrease, but we have been doing a lot of work around the culture within the department as well. The salary work was a major step in the right direction that helped us onboard staff. But it also has helped us with our retention, that as well as the culture work that we've been making efforts to address. We're looking at, we know, we've talked about this before, the secondary trauma that our staff experience working in the field is a real thing. So we're being more focused on self-care, workplace wellness, the hybrid work schedules. I mean, our staff really, that has been a kind of a game changer too for their work-life balance and giving them opportunity to take care of some of their needs while also serving the most, the needs of the Commonwealth. So the hybrid work schedules are focused on self-care, workplace wellness. We've also done things to support the staff with a shift premium. We always have staff that are on call and responding to after-hour reports of abuse and neglect and emergencies for our kids. And, to be able to pay them a shift premium that helps offset some of that being on call has been also significant in showing staff that we value them and their role and what they're doing to support our children and families throughout the Commonwealth. Discretionary leave is another thing that, when we talk about the culture work, again, secondary trauma, critical incidents are real things that happen. Our staff, see horrific things and experience horrific things in the field. So prior to the implementation of the rec changes that allow for discretionary leave, they had to use their own personal time. Now they can, we can support them with leave that is not their own, much as like state police does when the troopers experience a critical incident. So we modeled it, I think it was modeled after that, but that's been a huge support. Like I said, I meet with Frontline every other month. I have a host of virtual chat. They can ask me any question. They can email me anytime. We are very transparent and try to be very available to staff and giving them a voice, giving them direct contact with the commissioner's office. Again, just really working on that culture, helping them understand their value and how much we appreciate all that they do in different ways.
Senator Westerfield, you want to go ahead and make your introduction, and then you can ask.
Yeah, thank you. Senator, I do have some questions. Before I get to those, I wanted to recognize the group from, is it Mercer County, is that right, with us this morning? What grade are you all? What class is this?
These are high school business and marketing students.
Outstanding. Interesting committee choice. But we're glad to have you. These are students from Mercer County, and they are guests of both Senator Bledsoe and Representative King. And they asked me to make sure they got recognized this morning. So, Chairman, I appreciate that. We are always glad. No joke. You all might find the committee process a little boring or something, but I assure you these can be some of the most interesting parts of the work that we do up here. We're glad to have school students visit us in the Capitol anytime you can be up here. This is an important subject matter, even though we're not going to vote on anything today, but I'm glad you all had a chance to see that or watch what's going on. If you have a chance, I don't know how long you're going to stay, but please join either chamber on the floor at 2 o'clock up in the gallery and watch us do our work today. So thank you, Chairman. A couple of quick questions. One, I didn't hear it. Commissioner, if you said it, I may have missed it. And the first one is, what is the starting pay today? In fact, I asked this question of our state police commissioner last week in judiciary, and those are numbers I'd heard before, but I hadn't heard in a few years. What's our starting pay for social workers relative to every state around us? The gap on state police forensic labs, most, not all, but most of the states around us were in excess of $60,000, almost $65,000 a year, and our starting pay was $44,000 a year, which is criminally low. I hope the gap's not that bad. So that's the first.
Okay. Our starting salary for frontline social workers is approximately $52,000. That's, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Yes, and that's up from 35.
Right.
So again, great progress has been made in range in regards to salary. As far as how we compare to other states, I don't have that right now, but we'll definitely take a look and get that for you.
I'd be interested to know that. And then my second question, I got an email from a family court judge, not in my district, from quite a bit outside of my district, who knew that we were going to get this testimony today. And that family court judge mentioned a call or a discussion that was held wherein they were told, and perhaps this was with other judges, family court judges, or maybe other court personnel. I wasn't part of that call, so I don't know. Okay. But they were saying that there might be 100 or more of your social workers that actually aren't in the field serving families, doing what they're doing, but they're just running the hotline. Is that accurate?
Yes.
A. B, is that where you want them to be? Maybe, and there might be hotline roles for social workers that's the right fit, and that's the right service, and there are services you can provide by phone, and then C, if that's not ideal or what you're wanting, what are you doing to correct that?
So yes, we have approximately 100 staff, give or take, in our centralized intake branch that operates our our hotline and processes written referrals to determine whether or not they meet acceptance criteria.
Right.
And these staff are social workers, and we feel as if we want. There's a lot of decision making that happens with that first call to the agency, and a lot of assessment that begins there. They are the first contact with the agency a lot of times. So, we feel that it's very important that we have trained staff answering those calls and providing and gathering and collecting that information. They listen to the call, or they review the written documentation that they receive. They are looking into our computer system, looking at what prior history is there. They're completing AOC checks to see what other factors may impact decision making as to whether or not the information meets acceptance criteria. They're oftentimes making calls, calling the reporting source back to collect more information to help again determine whether or not those allegations are fit the definition for acceptance criteria around abuse and neglect allegations. So we do value our centralized intake staff. It is a very hard job. I've done it.
Yeah.
It is one of the more difficult. It does not always. People do not always think answering those calls would be that stressful or demanding, but it is. You're making decisions. You're making it in a quick turnaround time frame, and there's a lot of skill and social work expertise that is needed to do that.
The other two parts of the question, is that the right number of people? Do you have that? Are you trying to reduce that? Are you trying to build to that or onto that?
So right now, we have had a lot of turnover. You heard the turnover I mentioned earlier, and I'll be honest. Our priority was ensuring the front line was staffed when we had new positions. So we're currently taking a look at our staffing within centralized intake, and we are adding some staff, and we're also looking at opportunities to offer different work schedules within centralized intake, because we can see what our call volume looks like, and we know when our peak hours are. So we're also looking at trying to recruit staff who are willing to work some of those alternate hours to help us manage some of that call volume differently. So this is me just giving you a proposed idea, but so we're from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. or 12 to 8 different shifts, so that we can manage that call volume within centralized intake, as well as the other. In call volume, I think everyone hears centralized intake, they think it's primarily phone calls, but that probably is 50 to 60% of the referrals that we receive is through calls. The other 50 to 40% is through the web portal or JC3s from law enforcement, or we still receive written and faxed reports and allegations. So there's a lot of.
May I ask one more? Thank you, Chairman. I was going to ask about because of the correspondence I got about the hotline and your testimony. We've gotten complaints before about the length of time, particularly law enforcement, but not just law enforcement, sometimes school personnel, but that they're having to wait on hold. There's always been this mythical special access number that either does exist or does not exist, that some people swear exists and some people are convinced does not. What's the average response time, and what are you doing to improve it?
Yeah, so the average overall response time is very good. If I look at it just from the hours that the line operates, I get it every morning. So we're we're usually on average 5-6 minutes answering calls, and that's a high day. But when you break it down by hour, that's where you see the calls to back up, and primarily in the afternoons around 2-3 o'clock is where you begin to see the wait times increase. So we're doing that now. That's why we're looking at how to staff that differently, so we can have more staff available on the line to answer calls. And I think again, that's when reporting sources may have really, you see it begin to stack around lunch times a little bit, but then around 2 or 3 o'clock is where we see the biggest spike.
Any speculation about why?
I could speculate, but lunchtime is when professionals have breaks to make reports. I would think that might be one reason why we see lunchtime and then we have our own staff are taking lunch, so we're again prioritizing and staffing those hours differently. And then around 3 o'clock, schools, our teachers, educators have opportunities to make calls. So, that's me speculating. But again, we're really digging into our data and looking at that hourly, and to determine, how we may need to staff the line differently.
So I want to make sure. So with the intake, it's not, there aren't regional centers where are there?
Yes.
So-
So a couple things happened. Originally, when centralized intake began back in 2008, so centralized intake has been around a very long time. We have regional teams. There's 9 regional teams across the state, and we still have those teams today. But in the late 2021 into the spring of 2022, we were able to move our centralized intake teams onto what we call a statewide platform. So which gives us more opportunity to operationalize. So before that, we had 9 different teams across the state, which we still do. But if there was not opportunity to easily transfer calls between teams. So if we had a staffing shortage, we did some things through call forwarding and different things like that, but it was really a lot to manage and difficult. By bringing them onto this statewide platform, we still have the nine teams across the state, and calls are routed regionally based upon their, I think it's area code, so that they still get routed to their 9 separate regions. However, if there is no one available to take that call, if all of the staff are currently actively on a call, then it gets routed statewide to the next available worker, which helps reduce the wait times. So we still have our 9 regional teams that answer the majority of the calls for their respective geographical areas, but we had the availability to offset with support from across the state.
Help me understand where the decision points are that lead to a social worker responding to a particular complaint.
So our centralized intake staff, like I said, they receive the initial call from the reporting source, and they ask questions and they collect information. They're also looking into our system to see if there was prior history, doing that AOC check to see if there's any criminal charges that need to be assessed as part of that referral. They're consulting with their supervisor, and then they could also even call the reporting source. If the supervisor says, we need some more information. So if we had the reporting source's name and number, we'll give them a call back and collect additional information. But the centralized intake worker makes the determination, and then it goes to a supervisor who reviews it. And if the supervisor agrees with that determination, then that referral is forwarded on to the county where the family resides.
So the supervisor within that county makes that decision?
The centralized intake supervisor will determine and review the referral and make sure that the centralized intake worker made the correct determination, and then it gets forwarded from centralized intake to the local county.
Okay, so are you all comfortable that, and I worry sometimes that that's what we miss from not being able to call the direct office because of all the personal relationships and history, and I say that from a law enforcement perspective, working with them. I mean, they knew the families. Mm-hmm. So are we missing something by not having a conversation with someone that may know the history better, or do you all feel comfortable with just based on what's in the computer making those decisions?
Senator Carroll, that can go both ways. Sometimes decision making gets, because you do know someone can influence your decision the other way too. So the objectivity that centralized intake provides and the consistency with assessing allegations is something that was one of the reasons why centralized intake was formed. Now, if a referral reaches a local office and they do not agree with the determination, there is a process for them to say, hey, wait a minute, we don't agree with this determination. Let's talk about it. so that process and that back up to centralized intake it is there, and if there is still disagreement at that level, it can route to the directors in the divisions who will review it as well. So there is a process that allows for that redetermination if there is not agreement. If there's not agreement between centralized intake and the local office.
Senator Meredith, you have a question, sir?
I do, Mr. Chair, a couple. But first, I want to thank you for making this agenda item and hearing this, particularly during this budget cycle, vitally important. Commissioner Dennis, haven't seen your job description, but I think somewhere in there it had to be responsible for herding cats. And I know you got a difficult job. I recall, I think it was 2020, the ask was for 200 additional social workers. And you threw a lot of numbers at us, and I used to be a chief financial officer, so I thought I'd keep up this stuff. I just want to make sure I've got the right information here. But I think you said that we have increased that by 172
Overall, yes.
during the 2-year period. Okay. But you started the presentation talking about the current budget eliminating vacant positions. What was that number? Do you recall?
Approximately all of our vacancies are in the House proposed budget are not funded. I think that's approximately 160.
So obviously, that 160, are we asking for additional social workers above and beyond the 200 asked from 2 years ago?
I'm sorry, can you restate your question? I didn't.
Well, we said that 2 years ago the ask was 200. Mm-hmm. We filled 172 of those positions.
Yes.
You just said that the vacant positions were 160 some. So are we asking for more social workers above the 200 that you originally asked for 2 years ago?
That is what we have, are hopeful that will be funded within the budget. It's an additional 100 above the 200, yes.
Okay, so we're talking really long term. Not trying to catch you.
No,
just 300 social workers.
Correct.
Okay. I think that's important because my next question, Mr. Chair, is you mentioned that you currently have a caseload of 38 on the average.
We're 31 to 35
Okay.
now. Our peak was 38.
What's the national standard?
Our so when you're looking at caseloads, I want to clarify just a little bit, because you can look at caseloads a number of different ways. So when we're looking at that 31 to 35 number, that includes all of our current cases and all of our backlog of past dues. So our goal is to get our caseloads to 18 without and to catch up our backlog. So that is our nationally recognized standard and our goal.
And I anticipate that would be your answer. And if you do the math on that one, an additional 100 social workers is not going to get you there. So I assume this is a long-term proposition for us, and just are we trying to do this in 2-year, 4-year, 6-year cycle?
Well, and part of that too, again, remember, it's that so that if you remove all the past due work, our caseload average is around 20 or 21. So as we are, and part of why we have past dues is because the high turnover, 40% turnover. As workers leave, they don't complete work assignments and they get reassigned to another worker, and that just that compounds and builds. So again, that high turnover has contributed to where we're at with a lot of our past due workload. So as we are seeing more staff trained and more staff coming on board, we're seeing our past dues also decrease. So working to reduce those past dues is part of our long-term plan. And like I said, if we were to remove the past dues, and we were to say everyone was working and carrying a full caseload at full capacity, our caseloads would be right now today around 20 to 21.
If I could, Mr. Chair, if we acknowledge that turnover is a very expensive proposition.
Yes.
I don't think we take time to measure that and certainly reducing the caseload would impact that.
Yes.
And I think this is particularly important to understand as we're going in this budget cycle. We're going to have these discussions, and want all the committee members to understand what those numbers look like and what we need to do. I certainly support increasing the number of social workers, and
Thank you.
but I also expect some type of return on investment, and that would be reduction of our turnover number. But I would like to know kind of specifically, and again, not playing got you, but what can we look for in terms of measures of success if we in fact fund these positions?
Well, I would hope that we'll see that turnover to continue to decrease. Of course, we'll see our caseloads to decrease, our past due workload to decrease, and more timely services being provided to families.
Well, I like to see government be goal-oriented, and
Yeah.
I think those are certainly valid measures, but I would like some specificity for that to know exactly if we do this 2 years from now, here's what we can expect to see. And I know there's some variability in those numbers as well, but I'd like to know what the goals are and where we're trying to get to, and certainly turnover, caseload, any other tangible measurement I think would be beneficial.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
As you all move forward and with the increased number of social workers, have you identified areas within the responsibilities of the social workers that would probably have the most impact on reducing child abuse, neglect within our Commonwealth? It's kind of a broad question, but are there things that we've been lacking in or delayed that we can focus on that will have the most significant impact immediately on the ultimate goal? And the ultimate measure is that our numbers decrease and fewer children are being abused and neglected.
Yes, we have been doing a lot of work in the prevention space, I think, as you're aware. So, So moving upstream and being able to prevent child abuse and neglect is our ultimate goal as well. So we have we are currently looking at, we're currently implementing alternative response, which is a model that will help us with engagement with families differently and working with them as partners and helping them access services. So that model is already rolled out in 2 regions, and we're moving forward with implementation statewide. The other thing that we're piloting right now is our community response model. We talked about centralized intake, right? They process every year approximately 120,000 referrals for the agency, and about 40 to 50% of those meet acceptance criteria. So there's anywhere the remaining do not receive any type of real intervention from the agency because they don't meet the statutory definition that gives us the ability to intervene. So with our community response model, we have 10 pilots across the state right now where we are working with a partnering agency to forward those referrals that do not meet that statutory definition of abuse and neglect to that partner, and they are working to engage the family within the community into services to hopefully prevent that next call or future call back to the department. So we're really excited about that, and we're actually doing we're doing a formal evaluation to learn more about our success there and how to further implement that across the state. So then we also last year stood up our through a reorganization bill, was able to lift a division of prevention and community well-being, really doing a lot of work in the space of primary and secondary prevention. A couple of things, the community response is part of that, but really doing work in communities, helping to educate communities and support communities, and helping families prior to the involvement with the child welfare agency. So I think prevention is where we're going to see a lot of return on our investment.
I want to kind of change gears a little bit. As a state, as we continue to move forward in efforts to provide early childhood education for every child in this state. And we can argue about the models, but I think it's everybody's goal to make that happen. As we move in that direction, and there are more kids that are in early childhood education centers, and have you all discussed and have you planned ahead and kind of try to evaluate that? And I'm assuming that's probably going to lead to more reports, but it's also going to lead to reports being made that otherwise wouldn't have been made, and ultimately protect our children better. Have you all had conversations about that and with those numbers and how that would impact your responsibilities, and is that part of your growth plan, is to deal with that? Because I'm hopeful that we as a legislature are going to be very serious about early childhood education this session, and we're going to make a substantial investment and really try to get our kids in, grow the centers and get more kids in the centers.
Well, so yes, we're doing a few things in that space. Of course, we work with our early childhood providers on training and different aspects of how to recognize abuse and neglect. Our division of child care, as well as our division of protection and permanency, partner on that to offer those trainings to our providers across the state. But we're also doing, something. We're also working with, looking at our policies within the department, and looking at our Division of Protection and Permanency, where our child welfare policies sit, along with our Division of Child Care, and where those policies sits, and looking at opportunities to work more collaboratively, and where there's some overlap. So we are currently, that analysis is underway, and recommendations are being developed on how we have opportunities to, again, through that prevention space, to intervene earlier and connect families to services earlier, and how, again, within our own department we can better realign our resources.
We do provide protective child care assistance. So families who are involved with the child welfare system are eligible to receive child care assistance program, just to help mitigate any issues around neglect that there may be as well.
Thank you, Laura.
And from a preventative side, within our organization, we see that all the time. We're able to identify, I'm sure all centers, you can identify the families that are having the struggles. And for us as a provider to have resources to, short of reporting an incident, which is normally where we end up, to assist those families. And we talk about that all the time. And there are certain kids that we monitor really closely day to day. And so I love the idea of the partnerships and being able to catch those things before they happen. And, so having those resources, I think, could be a huge advantage in that area. Just overall, what are your thoughts on, the idea of universal pre-K, the idea of having every kid in this state attending early childhood education centers? What do you think the net impact would be on the safety of our children? And our ability to protect our children under that model? And that's just an opinion.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Under that model, children having access to universal pre-K, you have more eyes on children. And we know that our educators are our biggest reporting source. So, I think under that model, we would have not only help support the emotional and social development and well-being of children and help prepare them for kindergarten, but we would also be looking, we'd have more eyes on children, and we could be able to intervene earlier and get them access to services.
We often deal with families. You have families that move around from county to county, from state to state. How adept are we at being able to track the history of these families, especially from other states? Do we have agreements with other states? Do we share information? How does that work? And I know we've covered that in the past, but I just don't remember right now.
So if, are you asking from a child protective standpoint? Yeah.
Well, when a report is made on a suspected abuse, what resources do you all have to gather information from other states on the history there? Because a lot of families leave the state to escape their record.
If it's known to us that the family is coming from a different state or had lived in a different state, we do have the opportunity to. And every state's different and it varies. Ohio, for example, is a county administered state, so you can't call one state agency number and have access to, like in Kentucky, we have central office staff that would be contacted, but in Ohio you get to call county to county to county to get some of that information. So again, it varies from state to state. Our centralized intake staff, and that's part of their process, is collecting information from other sources. So again, centralized intake or our frontline staff have the opportunity to contact other states. What they are able or willing to share just depends. Anything else you would add to that?
I would just say that we do frequently work with other states closely when we feel a need to keep a close eye.
Who would be responsible? Would the frontline social worker, if they find out that this particular family has lived in a couple different states, is it normally their responsibility? Are there clerical people that are able to help track that down so they have access to that information?
It's normally going to become known to that frontline worker as they are working with the family that they've had, that they have lived in other states. We do have staff that can help support that, within each county and region. Like I said, it'll vary depending on the staffing and the composition of the team, but it is usually that frontline social worker who's making that inquiry.
Okay. And we talked about entry level pay. What are the steps up, and what opportunities for advancement do our social workers have within the organization?
So, and we can get that scale for you if you would like. I don't have that with me today, but a worker usually enters the agency as a social service worker 1. And then after they have gained, I believe it's around 12 months of experience, again, I can get that for you, but then they can be reclassed to a social service worker 2, and then their next opportunity for a reclass is to a social service clinician 1, and then a social service clinician 2. Those are all reclasses that come with a 5% salary increase. And then they have opportunities to promotional opportunities for positions such as a social service specialist, a family services office supervisor, a service region administrative associate or clinical associate, as well as a service region administrator within the regions. And then there's opportunities to promote and or reclass into central office positions as well.
So is there a clear path? And I'm assuming those first 4 steps are related to time in service.
Time and experience and skill.
Okay. And as far as promotions, do the social workers know what the steps are they have to take to be eligible for promotion? Or is there a formal, you got to take this class or this opportunity's here to gauge who is serious and who isn't?
It usually is, again, with years of experience. There is no educational or credentialing or that is completed. It's years of experience, skill, and knowledge that is used for promotional opportunities.
Okay. Any other questions? Senator Elkins.
I want to thank you for being here today and I guess drill down into some of Senator Meredith's questions just a little more. Help me to understand the difference between past due cases and current cases, and also the numbers of each. How many current past due cases do you think we have, and how many that are not classified past due?
I do not have those numbers at my fingertips, but I can get them for you quickly. So primarily when we're talking about past dues, well, not primarily, when we're talking about past dues, we're talking about investigations that have gone beyond the 50 days that our staff, 45, 50 days that our staff have to complete those investigations. So so that is what counts as a past due referral. So again, I can get those numbers for you.
Thank you. I'd appreciate that. And if I may, one more question. You said that 18 is the industry standard, I think, for caseload. Does anybody meet that industry standard? Is that a realistic number, do you think? Is that something we could ever hope to attain? Because I think my math works out to needing about 300 more social workers to meet that 18 caseload number from our current of 1,355, I believe. So is that realistic, I guess, is my question.
I think it's realistic if we had the funding to support the positions. But yes, we do have other states that have met those caseloads and those expectations. Again, I can do some research and provide some more information on that.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
If you all would, just the information, if you could get it to committee staff so we can distribute it. But again, pretty excited about the progress that we're making, and I know the retention and all that is really important, and that data is important, but the statistics on our kids that's got to be the main piece of data that we look at as we move forward. I don't have any other questions, and I can't thank you all enough for being here and appreciate all the work that you're doing. And you seem to be very forward-thinking in your processes and the way you're addressing all these issues. And it appears that what we're doing is working, and I'm glad that the pay is up. And I'm still curious, like Senator Westerfield, on how we compare to other states. And really, that's got to be the gauge for us in all areas, because if we don't get up competitive, then we are going to lose all of our people to those states. So appreciate what you do, appreciate all your efforts, and to all the social workers that might be watching this. We can't thank you enough for everything that you do. You have a thankless job, and what you're being paid is still not enough. Living in that world and watching what the social workers have to go through, it's a very difficult position, and often a no-win position. No matter what you do, you're making somebody mad, and you're always under a microscope. So I appreciate that. What you have. Okay, a final announcement. Our next meeting will be, it's Tuesday, January the 30th at 9 a.m., and we will start hearing bills on that day. We have 4 so far assigned to committee, and we will have bills on that agenda. If there are no further questions, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.